All right, good morning. Thanks for joining our webinar today. Today we're going to be talking about how analytics can play a much bigger role in EHS programs. I know you already use analytics a fair amount in your EHS programs, but one of the things we really want to talk about today is how can they have an even bigger impact? And we're going to be doing that through some common scenarios that we see as a software company of how the Mapistry EHS compliance platform is used. Today, I am joined by Courtney Wilson, who's our senior sales engineer. She's got a ton of expertise on the environmental civil engineering side of things. She's going to be walking through a number of common scenarios that we work with our customers today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Ryan Janik. I'm one of the co-founders of Mapistry. I'm also a civil engineer, so we're going to go pretty deep on the environmental application side of things and how to use software platforms for that to solve some of the common problems that we see EHS teams encounter. And we're really focused on EHS managers, directors of EHS, VPs of environment, EHS, and what are the questions that come up in their day-to-day. That's what we're going to be focused on from a webinar and a demo perspective today. These are a couple of the topics we're going to talk about. I want to start with kind of the foundational layer of like, how do we get our data into one place? Because today's environment is a lot of spreadsheets, handwritten notes, stuff stored on site. So we're going to talk about it from a technology perspective. What are the common, easiest ways to get all your data in one place so we can start asking questions of the data? We're going to go through scenarios around basic compliance, accountability, and how to think about what might be necessary for follow-up training. We'll also talk about compliance assurance, so basic core operating principles for under your permits to operate. What are the common things you need to capture, and how can you use analytics to highlight where you might have deficiencies or gaps? And then we're going to talk about it from a trend and outlier detection standpoint. When we're looking at things like water samples, could also be applied to air data. But how do we understand where we're trending, what those outliers might be? What are some things to think about, and what kind of decisions we might need to make based on all the data? The only way we can actually do that is if all the data is in one place. If the data is in a number of different systems or very siloed, none of this works. So that's why we're going to start with this foundational layer. So the problem is, for most companies, this data was siloed, as you're seeing in the middle there. Oftentimes, operational leadership, EHS teams, local operator teams, everything is spread out. So the data becomes very siloed, and that makes it hard and almost impossible to really make decisions, really understand and get that complete picture. At the same time, your resources are even more limited. We see that with hiring gaps. We see that with remote work sites, or even with COVID has really hammered companies with not being able to step foot on site. And then you've got regulations. They're not getting any easier. The pace of regulatory development has continued to increase. So you're very resource constrained. Data is siloed. And then the symptom of that can be pretty costly fines, violations, lawsuits, or just customers not trusting a company, or supply chain issues. If you're a supplier, you've got all sorts of customers, whether it be another company or an end user. There's a lot more questions around what are your sustainability practices. So these are some of the common things we're trying to fix when we talk about using EHS analytics. A couple of the examples we have here today around what are the symptoms if we're not using EHS analytics, if we're not capturing all our data. It can be anywhere from $50 million lawsuits, $100,000 lawsuits. And just when you think about this, it's not just the money that's going out the door. Oftentimes these costs are 2 or 3 times more than what's being paid out, because we look at consultant fees, legal fees, and just operational downtime. And that's not even getting into the share price impacts or public relations or lost business or opportunity costs around this. So these are just a couple examples of, if you're not getting all your data in one place, you're not able to make decisions, you're not able to be proactive, and you're always in firefighting mode. These are some of the common things that we see come out of this. And it's only been increasing. This is not slowed down by any stretch. And then this is updated data. If you follow what the costs of like penalties are from the federal government, this is some of the updated numbers. As you can see, there is a year-over-year increase. This is the 2022 data, but always useful when you're looking at cost justifications, like why we need software systems, why we need additional training, why we should start thinking about how we're going to run an analytics program or do business intelligence in the EHS department. These are often some of the common talking points we see customers use, because especially around air, waste, water, these are pretty hefty per day potential penalties. So how do most companies do it today? As we said, data is typically siloed. You can see some, if you've got 50 facilities, that's thousands of documents getting emailed around. You're trying to funnel it all into one person who aggregates all that data in a spreadsheet and then kind of sends it up through corporate to different leadership. And then you've got maybe operations using Salesforce or Power BI or Tableau on the side, pulling in other data streams. How do you make sense of all this, and how do you really get a complete picture? And that's what we're going to be talking about today, because right now, even if you are using software systems, they may not all be in one place. They may still be siloed, even if you're not using just paper or just Excel. But if you've got a number of different systems you're running, you're still not getting that complete picture. And that's really what I want to give you, is that complete picture of what is my entire EHS program, not just this little part like just inspections or just lab data in a spreadsheet. How do I see it all together? So we're going to be talking about our software platform and how we use, how we are a business intelligence platform for industrial EHS teams. And we do that a couple of ways. As I said before, right now, the current systems, they're kind of all over the place. You've got a lot of data silos. So what we do is we take things like business data, production data, waste, fuel, equipment runtimes, all of that, and we can funnel that into our platform all automatically. So it's reducing the operational overhead of having to do that manual data entry, sending spreadsheets all over the place. The other thing we can do is capture data at a site level, whether it be in a mobile app or I have an Excel file I want to drag and drop. And that's some of what we'll show you. Is these are all the ways we can capture the data. It may be through our mapping system where you can annotate on top of a GIS map, and that'll also pull it into the exact same system. Once we get it into our platform, this is really what we're going to be showing you, and Courtney's going to go into some scenarios. So once you have all that data in there, you can start asking questions of it. You can look at what's my trend for data, where are my gaps, where am I missing something? That's what we're going to be focusing on today. If you want to see how some of this other parts and how we get the data in much more detail, feel free to reach out to us. You can drop questions to either of our emails, Ryan at Mapistry or Courtney at Mapistry, and we can show you more specifically how some of these like building blocks into the Mapistry platform work. So we think about data capture, those building blocks, in kind of three buckets. The mobile app, easy file import. So if I have an Excel file and drag and drop, and you're seeing a picture of that today, and it'll, in a lot of times, depending on what type of file it is, we've got a lot of intelligence built into the system that it can match, that this column is parameters, and these are the existing parameters. And once you've made those matches, it can remember that for the next time. So really reducing the workload for somebody at a site or a lab, or even for yourself to actually get data in the system by dragging and dropping. The mobile app is for facility folks, site level folks, going around, doing an inspection, creating tasks. They can pull out a phone, take out a tablet, go to the Mapistry app, and actually collect that data as part of their normal workflow. So they don't have to come back into an office and do it on paper, scan it in, send it to somebody else. It's just part of their normal workflow. And then the other really cool part of how we collect data from a foundational layer is our API. So we can connect this computer to computer, where your existing business systems you guys can push data to Mapistry so we can capture that. Like I said before, things like equipment runtime for air permits, production data, that can all get pushed into the Mapistry system. And so these are the three ways, the foundational ways we capture data so that we can run some of these really cool analytics that I'll show you. The other part, once the data is in the system, and this is just a general overview, is that we can then trigger alerts off of that. You can create tasks to follow up with it, and you can actually map some of this data out. So that's the other piece of the platform, is just being able to communicate information out. And the final piece, and the focus for our webinar today, is really the analytics. How do we detect exceedances? How do we hold staff accountable? How do we have transparency? How does operations have visibility into what the EHS team is doing? And ultimately, how do we identify risks before they become a problem, some of those symptoms that we saw before? So we're going to go through 4 scenarios. We had kind of 5 agenda points for today. We had the foundational layer of data capture, mobile app or web app, the API, so the direct integration, and uploading a file. That was the foundational layer. Now we're going to talk about 4 scenarios that we're going to show you how that happens. So 1, we're going to talk about how do we look at analytics around compliance with inspection requirements and that they're on time. And some of the common questions, and I'll repeat these as we go through with Courtney, is how can I see if my region is performing? And then from an even higher level, if I'm a national director, how can I see which region is underperforming? Can I look at like 4 different area managers and see how, say, the East region is performing versus the West region? So we'll show you that, and I'll repeat some of these scenarios. The next scenario is, are we creating corrective actions, or are we just pencil whipping inspections? And then the flip side is, how do I reward high-performing managers that really are taking this seriously? Because this can be a promotion pathway. For example, one of our recent annual conference, we had at least 3 customers that said that they had been promoted, or they had people on their teams promoted because of the use of Mapistry. And it's just a further, 3 people out of like 50 people at the conference that were talking about this. That's a pretty high level of promotion pathways based on the analytics that you're pulling out of the software. So it can work both ways. You can see who's pencil whipping, but you can also see who's taking this seriously, running a really great program, and potentially have promotion pathways, or how do you reward those people? The third scenario we're going to go into is, we have an air permit. How can we tell if we're logging daily our, say, paint booth paint usage, that's required under the permit? Can I find gaps in my data, whether I'm a site or regional EHS manager? And then from a national perspective, it may be, really, what should I be worried about? Is there an area, specific sites? If this is a high-risk site, very, very tough regulatory environment, should I pay more attention? Can I get alerts and see those kind of data gaps? And then the 4th scenario is, under the Clean Water Act, if I've got water permits, whether they be stormwater, processed water, can I look at things like, what, is a treatment system underperforming? Should I be doing, making more investment from a capital expenditure standpoint at certain sites, from a national level or a company-wide level? What should I be worried about from a lawsuit perspective? The slide I showed you before, $50 million for one site with Formosa Plastics. How do I stay out of the news? How do I avoid penalties or other lawsuits? Where should I make CapEx and improvements on my sites? So these are 4 of the scenarios we're going to go through. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Courtney to show you, and I'll talk through the scenarios, and then she's going to dive into how the software platform actually handles it.
Great, thanks, Ryan.
So Courtney brings in her environmental background to a lot of these different scenarios as we're demoing the platform, because it's really 2 sides. It's the software platform, and then it's also the environmental application of the analytics. There's a lot of like BI tools out there, analytics tools out there, but one of the things that we really want to make sure is that whatever you're using for a BI tool is that it actually solves the environmental application side of things. So I'm going to flip the screen over to Courtney now, and then you all should be able to see our software.
Okay, there we go. Thanks.
Cool.
So the first thing we were going to discuss in those scenarios was around inspections and whether or not individuals, regions, or sites are completing those inspections. So you can see here I've used my saved views, and I'm on my West region view. So I'm looking specifically at my West region's data here. And what I can see here quickly is there's a lot of red showing up. I have past due inspections. In fact, I have 8 past due inspections for this region. So with Mapistry, you can, all of these become interactive. If I want to know more about what specifically is past due, I can click into this and see, well, most of these came from the same site. So that lets me know there's a problem specifically with that site in this region. I can also see here which types of inspections the West region is completing. So they're working in safety, air, and stormwater. If I wanted a higher level view of this data, what I can do is I've got this filtered to my West region, but if I wanted to look at all my sites together, I would just clear that filter, and then I can refresh my data. And I can see here across all my regions that there's 17 past due inspections, so that's jumped from 8 to 17. The percentage went down, and then I can come down here and I can see also in a map view specifically which sites are approaching that 30% or more late, or which sites are doing well. So I can get quick views here and see, hover over and see who's responsible for that site and see what their past due completion rates are. I can also, again, drill in if I wanted to see which 17 sites are, which specific inspections, if they're related to a specific category or again, a specific site, I can pull that up here as well. I can filter these so I can see which, I can sort these and see which types of inspections are missing. So I'm missing some method 22s, and again, a lot of this was that workplace exams missing from my Seattle facility in my West region.
And by sorting those, Courtney, it allows whether you're an area person or a national person to figure out, like, should I focus on one specific geographic location, or is there a type of inspection that I'm really struggling with?
Right. Yeah, so we can filter, or we can sort by site name or inspection, and again, get those insights into where do we need to provide additional training or education. We can also set up alerts here. So right now I've got it filtered to all my sites. So if I wanted to receive alerts when, you know, past due inspections became greater than 15%, I can set an alert here for that. And I'd maybe want to receive that on like a weekly or a monthly basis, and I can assign it to anyone, a Mapistry user or not. So we can send those directly. So another way that could be used is if I wanted to filter down maybe to a specific category of data, like my stormwater data, I can filter down to that and maybe have those sent directly to our regional stormwater or the head of the stormwater compliance group so that they can be notified directly. So whenever I set filters, that's going to affect how my alerts work, and my alerts will go out based on the filters that were set.
The other thing on that, at least I've seen it a lot, is you can add non-Mapistry users. So if you're sending it out to somebody that's like on the operational side, that doesn't want to log in. We know operations folks or execs may not want to log in all the time. Something like that, you could just have them sent out a snapshot of inspection status for maybe their region.
Yes, so we can set the alerts like I showed, and then there's also this delivery option. So I can come up to the top of my screen and schedule deliveries. And so this will just send a basically screenshot of a PDF of what the dashboard looks like at that date and time. And so here you can see which filters are turned on that are going to be influencing what is sent. And like Brian said, this doesn't have to be a Mapistry user. You can send it to anyone inside or even outside your organization. And you can choose, PDF is probably the most popular, but you can also do a CSV file of all the numeric data behind these visualizations or other image formats.
So for the folks that scramble to put together a PowerPoint of visualizations for leadership once a week, once a month, this is a really nice feature to be able to just automate that entire dashboard.
And then just a few other ways you can drill into the information. You can look at it by specific site name. If you wanted to go farther and just look at a specific inspection form, that's available, or who was responsible for it. So you can set, you can create these custom views and then create alerts based on that information that you filtered to. With that, I think we'll jump over to the task scenario.
Yeah, so I guess, how do you tell, the question or the prompt is, how do you tell are sites creating corrective actions? Are they getting closed out? You know, how do I use what I'm finding in an inspection process to better, basically better inform my program, but also coach up the right practices they should be taking?
Yes, so in Mapistry, corrective actions are going to be part of your tasks dashboard. And, you know, I know from experience working with sites that, you know, if your regional inspector or EPA comes out and they see no corrective actions across the board, they're going to be highly suspicious about what is actually going on at your site. We've seen where inspectors will say, well, I found 5 issues today and you haven't seen an issue in 3 months. Like, does your site know what they're doing? So we feel that tasks are really one of the most vital health statistics to your compliance program. So we see here, we can see, and this I've got it filtered to a previous quarter. We've created 15 tasks, but I have a lot of sites that I'm evaluating. So my first response is 15 just doesn't even seem like enough tasks for a whole quarter, and the number of sites I'm looking at. We can also see past due tasks. So we can see who's not closing out their tasks. So similar with the inspections, we can see who's not closing out their tasks. And we get all the details right here, which is great. You don't have to go flipping through a bunch of emails. You get all the information right here about what is, what the task description was, who it was assigned to, if it was given a due date. You'll see here if it's a recurring task, it'll have a frequency, but you can get all this information, you know, you saw in just a quick click. So we see I've got 15 tasks. I'm already dissatisfied with the number of tasks here. I can start setting alerts. You know, maybe I want a monthly alert if the task if the task generating is less than 25 or something. Maybe I want to set a goal of 25 and follow up with sites if we're not seeing at least 25 a quarter. And that's going to be personal to the number of inspections your facilities are responsible for and the number of facilities you have. This is the roll up of what everybody's doing. We can also come down here and see tasks by category. So again, I can see only one air task out of all my sites was completed last quarter. That's pretty disappointing. And then I can come down here to my map view. Well, only 3 of my sites are showing up on my map view, and this tells me only 3 sites have even been adding tasks. So while, you know, I may also want to be frustrated that people aren't completing tasks on time, these 2 sites are at least identifying issues. We could see from my site names, you know, I've got about 25 sites here. So I should see all of those on here if everybody was adding tasks.
And what's the concern with that? That you only have a small handful actually creating tasks? What do you typically see for like follow-up items from like the national level or programmatic level?
So if only a handful of sites are completing tasks, there might be, you know, maybe the first step is just training around the importance of tasks how to add them to Mapistry or how to track them in your system of record, add them to Mapistry. And again, just reinforcing that we know your sites aren't perfect. We know it would be impossible for all these sites to be in perfect condition all the time, and that it's really that identification of the tasks and closing it out is where we demonstrate that we are aware of our permit conditions, we are aware of our requirements, and we are taking those proactive and positive actions to keep our sites in compliance.
Yeah, and I think from what I see is if you're doing it on paper or storing records at the site, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You just don't know that you have this, and this is pretty common in programs. So having a system in place that at least identifies the gap, then you can do something about it. Where we see probably 95% of programs, they don't even know. They're just, ignorance is bliss. We don't even know if we're creating tasks. So one of the values of having a platform is actually having some insights into, is this a problem? Then you can take action on it.
And part of what's great with the Mapistry data capture system is these tasks also, we see them all roll up here, but they are also being emailed out to the assignee at the time of assignment. So you can get that information to the person who needs to take the corrective action very quickly. And you can also, they're going to receive an email with all of these details as well as any photos that might have been taken at the time of the task creation.
Well, in the interest of time, let's jump on to our third scenario, and this is around air permits. A lot of times air permits have a requirement that you're capturing material usage daily. You're running it through some sort of emission calcs. We can do that in the Mapistry platform. A lot of companies that we're pulling into our platform currently do it in Excel. Now we can capture the data in Mapistry. And one of the things that we want to look at in this scenario is how do we know that we're meeting our permit requirements of logging that data rather than just putting it on a clipboard next to the paint booth? How do we know we're grabbing it every day so we can actually see this information in real time? So Courtney, if you can go through, how do we know if it's getting captured? Are logs getting missed? Those type of questions that somebody at a site, regional, or even national level might have.
Sure. So in Mapistry, again, on our site level, each site level is going to have access to our logging tools where they can enter information manually via file upload, or again, even if it's directly connected via the API, that's going to come here and tell you if these logs are being completed or if anything's missed. So we can see I'm looking at two of my sites that are logging production data here. And I can see, well, it looks like they've fallen off in this most recent week where they were trending really well and then they've dropped off. So, maybe this is a file that didn't get uploaded. Maybe this is an API connection that needs to be looked into. Maybe somebody didn't come in daily and enter their logged items. So this dashboard is telling me whether or not information is being logged. And then again, similar views to our other website or other dashboards. We've got this completion rate up here. So again, I can see we've dropped off. We're just looking at air data. So this is showing me that I'm looking at air data. If I was looking at multiple categories, the breakdown of logged items would be here. And then I can see which two sites they're doing. So I can see this site, if I hover over, now has that 5% past due. This site also 5.5% past due. So both sites look like something went wrong in this last week. So we can look again at the data and see, yeah, it looks like both sites had some missed logs in the last week. So I can reach out to both of them and see, make sure they're aware that this has been missed and make sure that it gets completed.
And this comes up often, even just with personnel changing over at a site level. Everyone's dealing with a lot of change management and personnel gaps. This is a quick, early detection system, as Courtney was showing you, of like, okay, we were doing great and something fell off. It prompts you to dig in a little bit deeper and go, why? What's happening at these two locations for it to drop off?
Mhm. And like we talked about on the other dashboards too, you can create those alerts if you want to know anytime this is above 0, or if you want to schedule those deliveries again, so you're getting like a monthly snapshot of how performance is going at these sites.
That's a great way to kick it over to maybe a production staff or operations folks to actually know, hey, we're asking your operators to take on some of these environmental requirements that are core to our air permit. How do we alert you on the operations or production side? Your team has fallen off on like what we need from them. And that goes back to one of the earlier things we talked about is like everybody's resource constrained. Oftentimes you're putting these core environmental requirements on an operations, maintenance, production folks. So how do we make it easier for their management or supervisors to know that there might be a gap in the process? All right, should we jump over to the fourth scenario now? This is around water permits, so really cool stuff we can do here. I mean, whether we're taking a file directly from the lab and accomplishing that foundational data layer of just drag and drop, easy matching of the data. Now that we've got it all in here, Courtney, if you can just talk about how do I look at some trends? How do I look at like potential spikes and like unanticipated results, or just seeing what are my outliers? And then, are there any kind of pattern changes that I can glean from this data?
Sure. So I'm using one of my saved views. I'm looking at just my TSS data for the previous year. And we can see right here, it's telling me how many different sampling events, the sampling results, and also a roll-up if any of the data came back with a laboratory flag on it. You could access that data here as well. But I can see we've got graphical and tabular views of our sample results. So I can see right here that this demo site, the TSS jumped way higher than all of my other sites on this June 3rd sampling event. And so, Mapistry has some built-in outlier notifications already. So if this was a statistical outlier, you would have received an email about it. And similar, if you have permit limits, you would have received an email anytime one of these samples is above a permit limit. But you can also, again, this is where like being able to send information to users outside of Mapistry can be really useful. So if you have a water subject matter expert and you want to send them notifications if anything's, above a certain level, you can set those here. So we can send anytime a result is greater than, maybe 200 for our TSS, or maybe 100 for TSS. And you can send that to your subject matter expert, and they'll get a notification whenever a sample comes back above an internal limit trigger. And then similar. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I just want to show that like you can see on the green there that it's been trending up. And I think from the business side of, if it's in an Excel file on a site, you're reliant on that person to email that alert out that Courtney just showed you. And it just, by having it in one system, you can see the trends and when stuff starts to deviate, but by using notifications, you just use more of the resources you have within your company. Courtney's point's great about you want to get your subject matter experts or flag it for somebody as fast as possible. You don't want to bring them in when you're in lawsuit mode. You want to bring them in when there's still time to do something. Sorry, Courtney, go for it.
No, that was great. I was just going to show some of the other information and calculations that are done in Mapistry. So we're tracking your sample results. You're also entering your flow data into Mapistry, and then we're using our calculations to create mass load charts for you as well. So we saw that kind of green, that spike in the sample, and it looks even more severe when we look at it relative to the mass load versus just the numeric results. So you can, if you're looking at one site and you've got some continuous flow data here, you can start to compare, am I taking my samples at representative flow times? And then you can also get that mass load calculated directly for you in Mapistry. And the final view on this dashboard is one, so if you're looking at multiple pollutants at the same time, it's going to show you high to low all of your results for that pollutant category. So again, we see that same 500 from that demo site is much higher than all of our other samples for TSS.
Yeah, and both of those, like if you're thinking about business decision making and business intelligence from a mass loading perspective, that's really interesting because if your wastewater permits, like if your permit fees go up depending on the amount of mass loading you're sending to a wastewater treatment plant, and you've got like, you don't want to get hit at the end of the year or the next permit renewal of like a ton of money because your mass loading is way over the limits and you've triggered different like multipliers for your, if you're discharging to somebody else's wastewater treatment system. You get an early alert that you can actually come in and adjust. The other thing from a business intelligence standpoint is the chart on the bottom, Courtney, if you can go back to that, is like that's a great tool to use for thinking about CapEx and think about, well, if they're so far out, have we already invested in their treatment system? Is this, is TSS becoming an emerging concern? Are we seeing that trend go up? Should we think about budgeting for next year additional like clarifiers or something to combat those TSS results? Do we know this is an older facility that needs some updating? So 2 ways you can use it at a higher level from a business intelligence standpoint.
And then I did just want to kind of highlight some of the additional filters and ways you can use the Mapistry. So one is the medium type. So if you want to look at all of your, everything that falls under water samples, stormwater, wastewater, groundwater, you can see them all together, or you can come in here and filter down to just one medium type. You can utilize CAS number or parameter name when looking, when filtering to your pollutant of concern. You can drill into specific sites, monitoring locations. If you're taking those field QA samples, so your field blanks or equipment blanks, you can turn that data on too, so you can see if there's any issues related to your blanks. And then finally, you can toggle what type of units you're viewing all of this information in. So there's a lot of flexibility in this system and a lot of different ways to kind of slice and dice that data across your entire organization.
And Courtney, this all comes right out of the box for the user, correct, in terms of what they get for filters. And then can you touch on, like, they get all this out of the box, what can they do with it if they have a view that they really like, that they've configured with all these things you showed?
Sure. So what we have out of the box is our saved view. So you can turn on, maybe I just want to look at a few sites. Let's see. So you can create different filters here. So once you get a set of filters you like, you would come over to that saved filter option, and then it allows you to name those filters. So I have my 2 saved filters here are for COD and TSS. And then also you can share that filter view within your organization. So if you, if you have a way that you like to see the data, you can share that view within your organization so that the person you're talking, if you're talking to somebody about the problem, you can share your view with them and know that you guys are looking at, the exact same data and having a conversation around the same data set.
Yeah, and that's valuable if you've got as an organization, if you're always struggling with similar parameters or things you kind of want to keep an eye out. And back to your earlier point of sharing the outliers, like TSS is a big issue for us. Let's share it with our internal subject matter expert. Having a saved view around that particular parameter of concern that may be unique to a company, whether that's TSS, COD, PFAS, whatever it may be, you can create that and kind of track that over time. Right. Well, thanks for going into the different modes that we can see some of that information. I'm going to flip it back over. And then I just want to remind everybody again of how we think about this, because there's a very deep technical piece of this in terms of the environmental application. But at the end of the day, environmental or safety, and the broader EHS programs are really supporting business operations. So we really see it as like a business intelligence platform that takes all the data in, can do really cool visualizations, but then share that intelligence for EHS, for operations, all of the above. So this is a good overview of how some of the data is coming in, whether that be fuel, water, sensors. We're going to send out a copy of these slides after the webinar today, and you can see a demo video if you want to come back. We'll also send out the recording. But all this information can get pulled in through the API, or as Courtney was mentioning, collecting field level data, whether it be a mobile app on inspections or tasks, to ultimately get into the Mapistry platform and then be able to set those alerts, report out, do analytics on it. So data capture, get all the data in. Then we can communicate. As you saw today, what Courtney was showing you is different alerts and reminders, whether it's a full dashboard visualization to replace what you might have to build out in Excel for a PowerPoint, unlike a quarterly business review for your internal teams, to just basic alerts and reminders for, hey, did you get that logged? Or we trended, we didn't create any tasks last month for any of my sites in my region. I want to know about that. So alerts and reminders. And then the piece that we were really focused on today is around analytics. How do I identify risk areas? How do I have staff accountable? How do I detect exceedances? So we went through just a handful of scenarios. There's a lot you can do from an analytics perspective. And I'll share emails for both Courtney and I at the end so we can go in, if you've got specific analytical scenarios you want to ask, feel free to reach out to either of us. But we work with a number of different companies around this. Always love adding new use cases, new types of analytical challenges to the database. So let us know if you have questions around analytics and what we can do in the Mapistry platform. We've got a couple initial questions coming in that we want to answer today. But I guess, Courtney, beyond the sharing of the dashboard and the analytical alerts, is there ways to get data out if I want to run some of these things still back in Excel or another BI tool? Is there a way to pull this information out so I can use it in other places? I think I lost you, Courtney.
Okay, sorry. I was saying everything that goes into Mapistry is very easy to get back out of Mapistry. Everything is exportable into Excel from basically like the original data set to any of these filtered views or subsets of data. Everything can be exported into an Excel CSV file for your personal use.
And what if somebody wants a different type of view? Some of the stuff you showed today, one of the questions is how customizable are these views?
Yeah, our solutions team can work with you to create custom dashboards. That custom dashboard would appear in Mapistry under the list of dashboards available to your organization.
Yeah, are there any examples you can share of what types of custom dashboards somebody might want or have asked for?
Yeah, so we've got our water dashboard that's out of the box, but if you want a similar view, like with your air data, those emissions levels from your facility, those are ones that we can customize based on your permit reporting values and give you views into that data. So any of the other data sets that you might be putting into Mapistry, we can create views specific to your organization and your permits.
Another question coming in is around if my company uses Power BI or some other BI tool, can we automatically push our data into Power BI or some other BI tool for them?
Yes, via our API. So it would be your system pulling the data back from the API, from Mapistry's API, pulling it back into your system. But that is something we can connect for you.
And then we've seen, other companies want to do that. A lot of times people just end up using it in Mapistry for a lot of the BI visualizations just because it's specific to the EHS team, and trying to like get a resource from IT to build those other dashboards can be difficult. But as Courtney said, we could have an API connection that pulls it in, or the other thing she mentioned was around like downloading Excel if you wanted to import it back into another system. Courtney, one of the other questions around analytics is this available to everybody on a site? Like, how does it differ for site versus like the corporate user mode? What can they see?
So the difference is going to be in Mapistry, the permission levels. So if you are connected to a site, you're going to see only the sites you're connected to in Mapistry. So a single site user would just see their single site. A regional person would see the sites that they're connected to for their regional role, and then corporate would have access to all of the sites.
Yeah, and one of the other questions is around, is there site dashboards and company dashboards, or they saw something mentioned around that the site has its own dashboard. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, the site, so there's the site dashboard and then the analytics dashboard. So the site dashboard is where that data input happens. And so that's going to have their inspections. They'll do their inspections in Mapistry. It'll have the questions for the inspection. Similar, they're going to log their data in the site level dashboard. So the site level view is going to show users what is specifically required for their facility, as well as the frequencies that those inspections or logs are supposed to happen, and provide reminders about doing the data input. And then all of that input data is what we were looking at today in the analyze side on the analytics dashboard.
Yeah, big focus for today was really that like regional EHS, area EHS, director, VP, national, corporate level. On the analytics side, we could almost have our own webinar just on like site level analytics of, did we do all the different media types for my one site if you were, say, a plant manager or a maintenance manager? So today we were looking, what we were showing you is really that kind of higher level view, but as Courtney mentioned, the site level also has their own analytics that really allows them to focus on what do they need to do from a compliance calendar standpoint to how am I trending on my own site. Courtney, anything else you want to share with the audience today in terms of things to think about from analytics, best practices?
I guess some things to think about are, like, one, just spending time with your data. Like, the more familiar you are with the data, the more it's going to be, you're going to know what these numbers mean. So spend some time with your data. Spend some time looking at like those custom creating those saved views so that you're getting the information that's important to you, and then share this with, use this to build your presentations or decks to corporate, or just share with, those top level executives how much the EHS program is actually responsible for. Because as Ryan was mentioning at the start, those users that discussed getting like the promotions around after utilizing Mapistry, some of that was just because management now understands how much EHS is truly responsible for.
Yeah, it's a great point. Is if you have all the data, make sure you're sharing it. And you're right, Courtney, like it's sometimes underestimated by folks outside EHS what really goes on and how many data points. We did some great webinars with customers around tens of thousands of inspection points. Can you imagine that across multiple facilities? It's just an incredible amount of data. Well, thanks, Courtney, for jumping on this morning and doing the demo and going through some scenarios on the analytics side.
Thanks. This was fun, Ryan.
All right. Thanks all.